Hello, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's presentation on conservation, agriculture, and soil health. My name is Laura, and I'm an AmeriCorps member serving with Conservation Nebraska's Common Ground program. Conservation Nebraska's mission is to protect our state's natural legacy by educating the public, supporting communities, and increasing civic engagement, which we accomplish through locally led education efforts and community engagement projects to address local conservation concerns. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping things to go over. Your cameras will remain off and you will be muted throughout the presentation. Please type any questions you have in the chat or at the Q&A section, and we will answer those at some point during or after the presentation. This presentation will be recorded and uploaded to Conservation Nebraska's YouTube page within the next couple of weeks. So if you miss any part of today's presentation, would like to revisit any part or share it with others, you will be able to find it there. Following the presentation, we will have a very brief survey that should only take less than a minute to complete. The survey helps support programming like this one, so we appreciate you taking the time to fill those out. If anyone in attendance is interested in speaking with a Conservation Nebraska member regarding conservation issues in Nebraska or to find out more about what we do, I will put our email in the chat. Tonight, we welcome Dr. Humberto Blanco, a soil scientist and professor with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, who is going to speak to us about the impacts of conservation agricultural practices on soil health and ecosystem services. So, Humberto, I will let you take it away.
Great. Thank you, Laura. When Laura sent me an email, I think it was like a month ago, saying if I would be interested in giving a talk about conservation. And I got excited because this topic, its name says conservation, right? So Conservation Nebraska. I mean, so I'm excited to be with you today. Like Laura mentioned, I'll be emphasizing on how conservation tillage, or can just say conservation agriculture, affects soil health and the services that soils provide. Okay. Yeah. So let's clarify. I have heard from different people or some researchers saying, okay, conservation tillage, sometimes we say conservation ag. These are different, right? Conservation tillage, it really refers to the use of reduced tillage or no-till, right? Plus residue management. So in technical terms, NRCS and others define conservation tillage as any tillage system that leaves at least 30% of soil covered with residues, right? Right, but that's probably just a technical term because we know that 30% has to be all year round. In some cases, in some of our experiments or fields, we see it's 30% in fall. Then we go back to the same fields in the spring, and the soil and some no-till fields do not have 30%, maybe 20 or 10%, right? So I'm talking about the extremist scenarios, but in some cases we have decent amount of residue. So clear conservation tillage there refers to reducing or eliminating tillage, right? But then now we're talking about conservation ag, which includes obviously conservation tillage, which is the basis, right? Tillage and no-till, I would say, is the basis if we want to conserve ag, right? So no-till plus residues, but there's one more thing. Please add permanent cover. We call, okay, permanent living cover, right? So that would be what? That would be cover crops, right? Or in some cases would be diversified rotation maybe, so we can have this soil cover, let's say 24/7 right? But obviously that's not possible like in winter time. We got some good snow last week, and then and even our winter cover crops are not growing, probably a month or two. Okay, so I'll be talking about conservation ag and its implications on soil health. Let's expand this. Mentioned about conservation tillage here on the left, right? Then we started talking about conservation ag, right? But then how does this relate to the five or principles of soil health? So we know that there are at least five principles of soil health, right? One is reduced till or no till. I would favor just no till, right? But we're going to chat more about the differences between these two. So reducing tillage or eliminating tillage, adding crop residues, diversifying crops, adding living material or planting cover crops, and bringing the animals back to where they used to be, at least for a few weeks or months, right? I mean, we need to separate sometimes crops from livestock, but probably not all the time, right? And sometimes we need that separation, but this both systems benefit, right? Crops will benefit from livestock, and livestock will benefit from crops, like in this slide. Now we are also talking about regenerative ag, right? What is that? Well, that's even more, involved, I would say, a broader approach, manage soils, right? Regenerative ag, regenerative, restoring, or improving is not only about just improving soils, but also the bottom line and the environment, right? But I would say if we want to regenerate ag, we need to regenerate soil. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. I'm a soils guy, so it's not because I'm passionate about soils. It just makes sense, right? I mean, soil is the basis. And somebody may say, what about water, air? Well, that's part of the soil, right? If we remember, soil has at least four components, right? Right? Those inorganic particles, organic particles, water, and air, right? So soil is the basis for our survival. For plants, obviously, for animals, and then humans, and the whole ecosystem, right? But how do these different practices, the principles of soil health, practice, the regenerative ag practices affect soil health? Okay, probably I'll be spending most of the time talking about soil health today. And maybe not much about crop yields, but I'm hoping that somebody probably, if you're interested, just jump in or let me know at the end, what are the effects of this practice on crop yield? So we can also touch how these management practices affect the bottom line. Okay. So this is what I'll be emphasizing today. We need to know the behavior, the attributes, right, of the material below us, right? This building where I am at my office, it's anchored soil, right? Our plants, our animals walking on soil. So we need to know the properties of this material. It's like human health, right? Right? We need to know how healthy this soil is, how healthy this human being is. Well, we need to run some tests, right? How healthy is this soil? Well, some of us probably call, some students, my students call soil dirt. Then, well, I mentioned in the first class, please do not call soil dirt, but still some students mentioned that during the last day of the semester. So, well, but regardless of what you call, we need to recognize that soil is the basis for everything, right? The food, fuel, fiber, fuel production. But how do we evaluate? It's like when we are not doing well, we go to the doctor, right? And then the doctor probably is going to run some tests. And it's the same thing with soil, right? we need to measure what properties the soil has, especially when we're talking about soil health, right? Or soil quality, right? So we have to evaluate physical, chemical, biological properties. I've been, doing work on this section on the left, physical properties. But we have been also looking at some chemical properties, especially organic carbon, organic matter, okay? And then lately, some of us have been also working in our group, been looking at biological properties because the system is uh, integrated, right? Because if we look at here on the left, this photo, I don't see physical properties separate from chemical, biological. I only see soil. But we tend to split like this in three groups, right? To make it easier to understand because the system is complex, right? So, but these are all together into what we call soil quality or soil health, right? So if we want to know how healthy our soils are, then we need to run some tests. Some tests can be expensive, and some tests can be relatively inexpensive, right? I mean, NRCS folks and others have developed some tests to measure these properties quickly in the field, right? But this is the blood of blood of soil or blood of earth, whatever some people call carbon, right? Organic matter. We want to know, since no-till is the basis for the regenerative ag, for conservation ag, whatever you want to call, since no-till is the basis and should be the basis, we would like to know if no-till is really bringing some of the carbon we lost to the atmosphere compared to conventional till. Conventional till used to be more work plow, but probably we don't use more work plow. Probably we've been using, we use now chisel plow, disc, probably like chisel plow is more common than more work plow, right? But we would like to see if no-till is really storing carbon. Because this carbon, why is Humberto talking about carbon? It is because most of the soil health indicators are strongly correlated with carbon. Okay, that's what I care about. Because, okay, let's just look at going back to this. What are these properties? I'm not going to go one by one, but let's just look at one. Color, definitely, right? What about soil structure? How strong are the soil aggregates? What's bulk density, penetration? Those are parameters like are indicators of soil compaction. Bulk density, penetration. What about water infiltration? What about water flow? We use this technical term, saturated, unsaturated conductivity, water holding capacity, available water. All these properties, soil physical properties are strongly correlated with organic matter, organic carbon. The same thing goes with biological properties, right? And earthworm counts, microbial biomass are strongly related to organic carbon. So I would like to touch on this. Does no-till really accumulate carbon compared to conventional till? Okay. Well, this is what we know from research data. Yes, no-till accumulates carbon more than plowed soils, okay, till soils. But that's only in the upper 3 or 4 inches. What about at the bottom of the plow layer? No-till in some cases could have less carbon because of residue stratification, a lot of microbial activity near the surface, right? Now, if we look at, let's say, the whole profile, right, down to 24 inches or 40 inches, right? Then sometimes we don't see any differences between no-till and conventional till. I said sometimes. What about in your farm? If you don't farm, what about in your neighbor's farm? So we need to look at this on a site-specific basis. This is very general, right? Conclusion. But in some cases, no-till could be storing a bit more carbon than even maybe for the 20 inches or at least like 15 inches. Okay, but this is in general what we know. No-till, yes, accumulates carbon, but that's only near the surface. Is that worthless? No, that near surface accumulation of carbon is critical for improving other soil properties, right? But we would like to improve that for the whole profile. I mean, like 0 to 40 inches or 0 to 60 inches would be nice, right? It seems that no-till will work pretty good in semi-arid regions. We know that, right? It increases yields, right? I mean, there was a nice review, several that came out from Peter Co. wrote a nice review, a global review on the no-till effects on yields and found that yes, in semi-arid regions, usually no-till increases yields, and at least in most cases, and relatively warmer, right? What about in cool temperate regions? I've been to Canada to give some talks and in Ontario, and then they were no when northern portion of the states, well, no-till is not working that great in some fields because we're dealing with cool soils, right? Sometimes we have decent amount of residue. Well, that's not going to allow soil warming in the spring. So climate needs to be looked at. What about initial carbon content? Probably we are switching from conventional till to no-till in high carbon soils, and we expect a lot of accumulation of carbon. Nope. I'm not against switching to no-till and highly productive systems, but you may not see huge changes because the initial carbon content was already high, maybe, right? What about time after adoption? So what I would like to see some benefits in the short term, right? What about 5 years, okay? You might not see it. Actually, in the first 5 years, no-till might lead to some compaction or soil consolidation. Wait, please, 20 years. 30 or maybe even 50 years. It's a long-term investment. Also, sloping soils can benefit from no-till, right? Than flat soils, because sloping soils are highly susceptible to erosion, right? Also, it depends on the cropping system, right? I mean, cropping system. Systems with low biomass production probably can benefit more, right? So what fields can, benefit the most from no-till? Okay, if you have a farm that's low in organic matter content, it's sloping, eroded, and medium texture soil, that's the candidate for no-till farming. And we should use no-till in all the soils, but what I'm saying, these soils will benefit the most. Okay, now it's how does no-till affect physical properties? We looked at how it affects carbon, right? As it near surface accumulation. So since I teach soil physics and soil management, I'm biased towards soil physical properties, but if you have questions about other properties, I'd be happy to address those later. Okay, what about temperature? As I mentioned here, soil temperature here at borrowed this the slides from that extension, the University of Minnesota extension, right? So here you go. We are comparing different tillage systems here on the left. Soil temperature. Okay, yeah, no-till remains covered with residues and can be cooler in the springtime. What about vertical tillage? That can help, but you're still disturbing the soil a bit, right? That's not no-till any longer. What about chisel plow? That can bury some residues, but it'll increase temperature in spring. What about the strip till? The strip till could be an option because look at that, you are uncovering the portion where you are going to put the seeds and fertilizer, and you are leaving rows without residue removal. So that will affect, right? I mean, plowing obviously will warm up the soil, but can have some negative effects, evaporation. Right? Here you go, at the bottom four here on the left. No-till, 32% water storage. What about vertical? You disturbed a bit, so it's only 25. What about chisel plow? 19 only. Strip till in between. What about moldboard plow? Obviously, probably moldboard plow would have been guessing maybe 10%, right? So if water conservation is important, then probably no-till is the way to go, right? But obviously we need to, there's a trade-off with the temperature, right? Here on the right, cumulative water loss. We lose a lot of, water from, by using moldboard plow. And chisel plow is next, right? And no-till is the best. Okay, so this is a summary from a paper that my group published a few years ago. So look at this physical property. These are the main ones, I would say. What's bulk density, penetration resistance? Well, these are indicators of soil compaction, right? How compact is my soil? Does no-till increase soil compaction? Well, it can increase or may not increase. Okay, it may or may not increase penetration resistance. What about aggregate stability? That's soil structure. That increases in most cases. That's what we know. Soil aggregate stability is the most responsive to no-till and other management systems. Water infiltration, generally it increases with no-till. What about water holding capacity? Can increase, but in some cases may not increase. Spring soil temperature, as I mentioned earlier, can decrease, right? What about summer temperature? They seem to be, reduces, right? No-till reduces summer temperature in some cases, which is great because that will reduce evaporation, especially in irrigated and semi-arid regions. We would like to cool the soil in summer, right? What's the take-home message from this slide? If you switch to no-till, you are gonna generally improve physical properties, okay? Compared to what? Conventional till refers to chisel plow or moldboard plow, okay? So generally, okay? Now, what about reduced till? Something to remember. I mean, we don't have a lot of studies on reduced till, specifically what, strip till or vertical till. I mean, disc, we do have some, but how do they affect compared to no-till? Can I use reduced till instead of no-till? Here is the answer. Bulk density is reduced till going to increase bulk density and penetration resistance, which means that with increased compaction compared to no-till, it seems no effect in most cases, mixed effects. What about aggregate stability? It could reduce compared to no-till or no effect. Water infiltration, the same thing. Soil water retention. So in summary, this is what we know from research, okay? Soil properties. Which one is the best if you want to improve soil properties? No-till is the top. And conventional till is at the bottom. Reduced till is in between. What we have seen from our research is this. In some cases, no-till, soil properties between no-till and reduced till do not differ. But in some cases, no-till is better. But definitely no-till is going to be better than conventional till. In general, there are cases when I'm going to touch that the next few minutes. In a few cases, no-till may not be as good, but that's rare. Okay, there you go. That's what we need to, I'd like to chat with you about the challenges and opportunities. Right? I mean, no-till farming, it's the way to go. But there is a key word here, challenges. I mean, no-till has provided a lot of benefits, right? When was no-till created? After Dust Bowl, right? In the 1930s. Then, okay, let's develop this technique. Let's disturb the soil less. And in a global scale, I mean, obviously, no-till is used mostly in the United States, Brazil, and South America. I grew up in the Andes of Bolivia. And in eastern Bolivia, we do have a lot of no-till fields. And then in Argentina, Uruguay, right? So it has reduced erosion. We know that. It conserves water. As I mentioned, improves in general soil properties. It can also increase yield, especially in semi-arid regions, right? Obviously, reduces labor, energy, right, and money. But we do have some site-specific challenges, right? I mean, you might not have any issues with no-till. What about your neighbor? What about in another county, another state? There might be one or two fields that are, challenged. Here you go. What about herbicide-resistant weeds? I worked in western Kansas for many years. Then I had plots of fields full of cosium. I no-till fields, but it's full of cosium. Humberto didn't know what to do. He's not a weed scientist. Then I contacted some colleagues. I still remember Phil Stallman from K-State. And then say, well, let's try this, let's try this. And we weren't very successful with controlling this herbicide-resistant weeds. What about some stratification? I mentioned to you that carbon can be stratified near the surface. What about some acidification, right? There's a slide that's coming. In some cases, could be compacted, as we mentioned. And then what is, kind of, I mean, it's cold and wet, maybe in the spring. In some cases, probably a little bit too much residue. Here you go. Just a case study here from Rogers Memorial Farm here, just east of Lincoln, near Eagle, Nebraska. So this is like a 40-year-old experiment. So we published a paper with the USDA folks several years ago, and we measured water infiltration with one of my postdoctoral researchers and others. And here you go. Let's look at this curve. This is water infiltration rate. This is very important for water capture, right? Or irrigation water capture. This site was rain-fed under corn soybean. Look at the moldwort plow is red. The green one is no-till. Blue is disc. Chisel plow is the yellow. You can tell pretty much here what's going on. Infiltration is higher on the moldwort plow. No-till and infiltrates this water. Yeah, that kind of makes sense if you measure water infiltration in immediately after tillage, right? But we did not do that. We did not measure water infiltration immediately after tillage. Otherwise, it would be biased, right? Because the soil is loose right after infiltration. I mean, right after plowing, right? And the way the water will just... No, we measured, this experiment was being terminated by USDA folks. We measured at least 1 year after plowing the soils or tilling, okay? 1 year after. Look at that. Moldwort plow had higher. I was shocked. I was surprised. Well, we measured other hydraulic properties and said, okay, that's it. Site specific. And as Haskolag Lab research station in northeastern Nebraska, right near Concord, where Charlie Shapiro and others had very nice experiment there. They have been adding good amount of nitrogen. There's a corn soybean system and continuous corn there as well, okay? Under different tillage systems, no-till, disc, moldwort plow. The red one is moldwort plow, right? pH here for continuous corn. There's that pH is almost 6, right? And then near the surface for continuous corn. That 6 is not too bad. I mean, it's going to be 7. We were like, that's in the textbook. Under field condition, 6 is pretty good. But look at the no-till. No-till, look at that. It's 4.67 or something. No-till is, in other words, probably attending, I don't want to use that word, but kind of acidifying the soil a bit, right? It's reduced pH. Look at that. What about corn soybean? It also no-till reduced, right? But not as much, as because we're not fertilizing soybean, right? So I would like to see no-till around here, 6.5 or 7 in an ideal world, right? I don't want no-till to be reducing pH. So it's a little bit of a challenge there, and it's stratified. But if you look at here, like bottom of the, right, like 10 inches or 15 inches, then you see it's near neutral, right? I'm talking about that shallow stratification of carbon, of pH, maybe even phosphorus. So there could be a challenge there, right? Okay, so what it is simply changing from, okay, I'm going to add up no-till and then I'll be happy. Well, maybe not. That may not be enough. That's the first step. There's one more pill to take. That pill will not solve all our soil health problems, right? I mean, no-till is not a fixed practice, is it? Should it be? Change is part of life, right? But we need to re-examine, how is this no-till working here? Okay, does it need an adjustment? Does it need a companion practice? Does it need a friend, maybe 2 friends? Right? This is the goal. I'm not saying, plow those no-till soils. Nope, plow is bad. Look at that, the red arrow. No, that's a step backward, right? Here is no-till. Please manage residues if you have too much or too little, right? Maybe a little bit too much residue in some cases, okay? But we need to leave what the soil needs. What's the threshold level? I think the next slide will show. In some cases, we need to add cover crops. And then add cover crops here and other practices. The no-till plus cover crops might not be enough, right? So this is it. No-till is the first step. What about crop residues? Crop residues make no-till work. I worked again in the semi-arid regions, and I'm going to show some photos where no-till is just the soil surface is naked. So it's not covered with this blanket. We need that blanket to make no-till work. Residue is not trash. I read some articles several years ago. Say, oh, it's a waste. Let's use it for biofuel. It's just a trash. Nobody is using it. It's a waste. That's the word actually, right? Waste. It's a waste. It's not waste. It's critical. It's the blanket to soil, right? It mimics nature. Let's make residue work. Yes, in some cases, we have maybe a little bit too much. Then have to manage it. It traps the snow. Reduces erosion. We know that. And obviously adds carbon. Because residues have what? 45% carbon, right? And then only that. What about microbial activity? There are so many other good things that come from residues. Physiologist residues are trapping. I took this photo at the top on the right in Kansas, in Hayes. That's where it was for several years. Look at that. The morning after some snow, the plowed field doesn't have any snow left. On the left, look at that. No-till plot with a lot of snow, right? Semi-arid region. Okay. In some cases, if you have a little bit more, a large amount of residue, consider this, and we know this, right? What about baling? A little bit? Let's share with the cows, okay? But you need to know the minimum amount that's needed, that should be left. What about grazing? That'd be better. These cows will return some manure. What about adding cover crops? We'll chat about that. Please leave the residues standing. I'm not an expert in machine, but I learned from technicians, or I learned from Paul. Yes, I'll go ahead. I mean, he retired last year, but right? He always talks about setting up the equipment. Managing residue starts at harvest. That's what he said. Right? Do not shred residues because they're tiny pieces. The wind will come in the spring and then they will be blown away. The residues need to be spread uniformly. Standing residues is better than flat residues, right? And then planting, do not plant 30 inches of corn. Do not plant in the center, in the 15 inches. We have been planting near like 3-4 inches away from the old row because that section is not very compacted. So the equipment can handle that, right? And then, I mean, if you have, again, a lot of residue, well, what about vertical tillage? Might not be that bad. As I mentioned earlier, it seems the differences between no-till and vertical till are not that different in some soils. So could be an option, a strip till, right? I mean, you're not exposing the soil every year. You just exposed one strip. And next year, the strip that was covered will be exposed. So you're going back and forth. What about a strategic tillage? Oops. We're going to touch on that. So here you go, baling and some of the tools, right? So some additional tools for managing residues. Okay, you said adding cover crops. How would that help? Well, when you add cover crops, it rains in the springtime. Humidity. If you get inside the cover crop, if you just kneel down or whatever, and then you can say it's humid here. That will help residue decomposition. It provides liable organic matter, activates microbial activity. That will facilitate residue decomposition, right? I have seen fields like this. I've seen fields in western Kansas, or even here in Nebraska. This one is from near Hayes, south of Hayes, because the one on the left, that's no-till. What's that? That's resin. The soil has been cooked. What about here? This just picture is just near mead. Here in Nebraska, look at that. I think there's no till field, but look at that. This soil is bleeding. It should be like this, the one in the center. What about the one here on the right? This corn silage. So the experiment we have the meat. And look at what the Mary Drone was for animal scientists. So look at on the left, right? No residue harvested or removed. The silage, right? This is just corn grain, but here it's corn silage. This, I mean, the wind comes and blows all the rich soil particles, the carbon-rich particles, right? Please consider adding cover crops, right? That can help. Well, it's easier said than done, Humberto. How can I grow cover crops in haze? Well, maybe forage crops. We have done it. With in Garden City, Colby, with colleagues, there it works in some years. We have to be opportunistic. It may not work in some years if it's dry year, right? So cover crops probably can help because these soils need cover. Okay, this is very practical. How much residue do you need to protect, to maintain, to protect soil and maintain soil properties? This is just rough numbers, okay? For organic matter, you need about 3 tons per acre of residue. Thinking more about corn residue. For physical health, physical properties, 2, 3. Biological. What about for soil health, right? How much? So this is just a number about, I would say about 3 tons per acre. Okay. So do cover crops really improve no-till performance? Here you go. Here is an example. Okay. And from Wichita. Yeah, I need to give a lot of credit here to Dr. Mark Klassen, who retired when I was at K-State. He had a nice experiment when I joined K-State in 2007. He had this is a wheat sorghum fallow. And then he put some summer cover crops after wheat harvest, sun hemp, right? And then off-season soybean. After 15 years, look at this, in the upper 3 inches. Look at the no-till alone, business as usual. You switch to no-till. This is the amount of carbon, 1.3 or something. Please add cover crops, okay? I added. Look at that, add sun hemp. You increased organic matter. By how much? What's the delta? 45%, 0.45, 0.45, which is about 1% organic matter. In 15 years, you can increase organic matter by 1%. That makes absolute sense. I've heard in some cases, oh, if you adopt cover crops, you will increase organic matter content by 1% in 1 or 2 years. Nope, that's not going to happen. But this performance on cover crops depends on cover crop biomass production. Like sun hemp produced how much biomass? 3 tons per acre. That's pretty good, right? And off-season soybean a little bit less, but this is good amount of residue. But it has to be consistent, right? And then yes, look at this. If you just switch to no-till and then don't use cover crops, this is the organic matter content, carbon content. If you add cover crops, you are gaining. But you know what? There are a lot of factors to take into account. This might not be happening in your field because in some of our experiments, even I do have in Nebraska, let's see, maybe about 10 experiments I have everywhere. If you don't get more than 1 ton per acre of cover crop biomass, let's say winter rye, I don't think you're going to see a lot of benefits. What's your cropping system? What about continuous corn? Well, if it continues, maybe corn, soybean. After corn, you might not see a lot because you have a lot of residue coming from the main crop, from the cash crop. Probably you're terminating cover crops early. What about planting green? Maybe a bit later can help. I don't think you're going to see anything, before 5 years in terms of carbon. What was the initial carbon content? What's the soil texture? What about grasses and legumes? Which one is better? I would say, in short, depends on biomass production. Depends on biomass production. I showed on a previous slide, sun hemp is a legume, soybean is a legume, and if they produce good amount of residue, they can still increase organic matter. Let's chat about this. This may be a little bit controversial, but I've been giving some talks about this. There's an interest in Okay, we have a lot of challenges with no-till in this, field. And can I, just plow once? Okay. The concern is probably that's going to undo all the great benefits, right? That's the concern, right? I mean, I've been using, let's say, no-till for 20 years. Now this guy says, okay, go ahead and plow. But okay, that's opinion. What does research show? Here you go. Let us summary here. Summary. These two on the left, the two bars are compaction parameters, indicators, right? Penetration resistance and bulk density. What's this? Well, if you plow once, occasional tillage is one single tillage in what? In 5 years or 10 years? I would say in 10 years. One visit. One single surgery in 10 years. So here, penetration resistance, yes, it's going to decrease because you just disturbed the soil, right? Bulk density, sometimes hard to measure, but it seems kind of 50% it will decrease. What about runoff? You plow the soil, you're going to increase runoff. Well, not really. It seems increases the blue one, right? So yeah, maybe in 50% of cases. What about sediment? We're going to lose a lot of soil. Yeah, be careful. You can increase, right? It seems in most cases. What about P? P, phosphorus. That's a concern with water quality, right? Because it's stratified in their no-till soils. Now, if we invert that layer, if we invert it, we're going to bury that phosphorus in deeper layer, right? Then we don't have a lot of P near the surface, so we're not going to lose a lot to run off. And that's the case. Look at that. It's reducing in most cases P near the surface. That's kind of expected because we are flipping that thing, right? The soil. What about soil structure? Nothing much there. Are you going to eliminate the structure? No effect. The yellow one is no effect. It seems that's the way this, right? Range there. What about soil water? You are going to, reduce water accumulation? Not really. Not an effect on most cases. The same thing with carbon. You're not reducing carbon much, right? Maybe in a few occasions, yes, again. I'm talking about general, most cases. What about pH? pH is no effect, but depends if the soil was really, really stratified in terms of pH, right? What about biology? I care about biology. It seems no effect in most cases. What about wheat density? Does it control? Yes, it controls, right? Here you go, the green one, it controls. In most cases, I would say. What about yield? Yield seems to be mixed here on the right? The yellow, like 50%, may increase in a few cases, and mixed effect in some cases, but it can increase or no effect. So that's what we know from research data. Okay, but we need to think about how long did they last? You said once in 10 years tillage. The benefits usually last 1-2 years. Now, if there isn't a negative effect, it also lasts 1-2 years. How often should I do it? Again, I know the benefits last only 2 years, maybe, but I wouldn't favor every 2 years. Maybe once in 10 years, right? Depends what you use. Do you want to flip that pancake like a pancake? Flip the soil? You can flip the improved layer, right? Improved layer, the layer with high organic carbon concentration, you flip it and bring the unimproved layer to the surface. So you can improve it, right? So that in that case, you need more work plow once. You need a surgery. But what about if I disc? That's a minor surgery. So the benefits are not going to be there if you really want to reduce the stratification, right? Okay. Do not, strategic tillage does not work on all soils. If you have an erosion-prone soil, don't do it. Shallow sandy soils, don't do it. Low carbon soils, nope. Depends. It's not like, Humberto might need some pills, but you guys might not need any pills. You cannot just prescribe this to all the fields, right? Right? Do you really need strategic tillage in your field? Please consider other alternatives. Occasional tillage should be the last resort, okay? There you go. If you have too much residue, You thought about removing some grazing? Have you tried the strip tillage? I mean, that's not as bad as, conventional tillage. Have you tried controlled traffic? Have you tried cover crops? Have you diversified crops? Look at that. Have you stacked practices, combined practices, right? Please consider this. That's what we need to think first, right? Okay. Okay, so the talk was about how can I manage soils? My reminder to you all is this, right? Principle. Please eliminate or limit soil disturbance. We know this. It's just a reminder, right? We need to cover that soil. It's cold out there, especially when it snows. Right now, it's going to be 70 here tomorrow, but not last week. Soil needs cover, about 3 tons of residues, okay? Add living roots. You can leave a lot of residues, but it's not adding any roots. Cover crops will add roots. What about some promoting some diversity with the crop, diversifying croppings, rotating crops. Yeah, different rooting depths, right? We need to bring animals probably at least for a few weeks, a month to the field. So we can feed the microbes with manure, add some fertilizer to our soils, right? Okay. There you go, my little summary here. So what did I learn from this? We have been reminded that we do have a good number of options for managing soils. In some cases, no-till alone might work, right? But in some cases, you need plus something else. In some cases, you may need 2, 3, 4, maybe in some cases, okay? Right? A strip till could be an alternative, and if you have a lot of residues, right? Some compaction could be. But occasional tillage, please don't quote me or cite me saying Blanco said, let's go ahead and plow. No, this is the last resort. If none of the biological practices work, maybe we can think about occasional tillage. But not all of us need this to take the same pill, right? It's the same thing with the soil. Human health, soil health is the same thing. We need to look at your field. We need to look at the specific field. Okay. It might need different management practices compared to the neighboring farm, right? Depends on local conditions and other factors. Okay, that's all what I had for today, and I really appreciate your time. And now I think I'm ready for questions if you have any. Let's see.
We do have one question from Sam. He's
Uh-huh.
asking, do you think most Nebraska farmers are moving to no-till? If not, why not?
Very good. Yeah. I mean, I've been preaching about no-till, right? I wish that all the farms were under no-till, right? But yeah, there are some challenges, as I mentioned. Those that I highlighted could be so. But in general, if you care about soils, about the long-term sustainability, the next generation. I mean, it's a switching to no-till. It's a must, to manage and conserve soils. And so, why some farmers are not using no-till? That's because there could be some challenges again. Some maybe compaction may not be there. What about weed management, right? That's why we have to try another option on top of that, maybe adding cover crops and maybe diversifying a little bit. I mean, right? Corn, soybean probably doesn't work that great in the eastern portion, but definitely after soybean, I mean, not till, right? And then, but when we have a lot of residues, then probably we need to manage that differently. I mean, yeah, there are some challenges, and then but we keep pushing, right? Because we keep showing the benefits. When it comes to soil health, yes, it improves. When it comes to yields, I mean, in some cases it's equal, in some cases it's improved, like especially in some arid regions. Okay, so I see one question here in chat. It says, how do you limit the nitrate poisoning in watersheds? What about switching to livestock grazing? Excellent point. Yeah, we need that combination. We need, because animals will add manure and probably you don't have to apply as much fertilizer. Because nitrate, yes, right? I mean, we have been playing with cover crops all over the place around, I mean, Norfolk and Concord, and we have sandy soils out there and putting winter rye, and depends on the year. In some years, we have seen some, decent amount of biomass production, I mean, rye production, and then that reduces nitrate concentration. But again, when it goes back to this principles of soil health, right? I mean, adding cover crops and balancing, right? Bringing some, animals. I mean, grazing, definitely I would favor that. Something that I did not touch is this. Does livestock grazing degrade soils? Does livestock grazing damage soils? We have done decent amount of work on that. And the answer is, in general, no. I mean, grazing does not compact soils, actually can provide some benefits. I mean, we haven't seen a lot of benefits in terms of soil physical properties, but we don't have seen a lot of negative effects either. So, but we benefited, right? Because we grazed our fields and livestock, and we reduced feed costs, all that stuff, right? Yeah, I agree. It says here in the chat, it's disappointing that they don't plant more perennials on hemp. I forgot to mention about perennials. Yep, yep. That's another thing. I guess there's one more here in Principles of Soil Health, add living roots and perennials here. I mean, don't get me started on prairie strips. Prairie strips. When I was a grad student, I got my master's and PhD degree from University of Missouri. And then I worked a lot on the mixed grasses, switchgrass, miscanthus, and measured water quality, soil properties. And you know what I noticed? We had plots with native grasses, like similar to prairie strips. And then there were more frogs there. There were more snakes. Interesting. So that then we measured soil properties, water quality, and that was really beneficial. So yeah. I mean, we need to, I'm not saying we replace cornfields with perennials. What I'm saying is we can insert these perennials as strips, right? It's perennial, yeah, prairie strips as buffers, right? So that can help, yes.
There's a question in the Q&A asking about cover crops versus synthetics economics.
Yeah, yeah, cover crops. Yeah, cover crops. I mean, like legumes can fix nitrogen and increase yield. I don't have that slide here, but what we found for legume cover crops after 15 years in that experiment in Kansas is this, because we had legumes there, right? So planting late maturing soybean and sun hemp as cover crops increased yield. But that increase happened when the amount of inorganic fertilizer applied was low. That's what happens. If you are applying a lot of inorganic fertilizer and you expect this cover crop to increase yields, no, I think that large amount of nitrogen input can offset. That's what we learned. It usually works pretty good when you are not applying a lot of inorganic fertilizer. But now, what about economics in terms of like if you keep talking about winter rye, does it increase the bottom line? Well, it's not going to increase. Grasses do not usually increase crop yields. We know that. In some cases may, but not in most cases. In some cases might reduce. But what? So why do I plant? Why do I have to plant then winter rye if it doesn't increase yields? Doesn't increase bushels per acre? Well, there are benefits. One is soil health improvements, right? Adding organic matter, right? But that's do we get paid for that? We should. Farmers should get paid for that. That's one. But the more direct benefit is what? Grazing. And we have done some experiments with cover crop grazing and no negative effects on soil properties. And then another one is haying or harvesting. We've been haying or harvesting cover crops from, in some of our fields, and we haven't seen any negative effects. I mean, we are not removing completely. We are leaving like 4 inches, right? After harvest, 4 inches, 3 inches of rye. Besides, we're not harvesting the roots. So it's still a win-win scenario, right? So, yep. Those are the benefits. But obviously, and I'm not saying that's always you win. I mean, in some cases, what about the biomass production is not that high? So then the benefits will be limited. Yes, I understand. But I'm talking about they're like if there's a normal precipitation, then that can be beneficial, right? But what about irrigating cover crops? In some cases, then irrigating in some arid regions and well, that obviously water is not free, but that we are getting more biomass, right? I mean, that can provide more benefits, probably, right? But grazing is not negative. Grazing cover crops is not negative when it comes to soils. Very good, very good. Any additional questions?
I would like to thank you, Humberto, for presenting for Conservation Nebraska.
Sure. Thank you, Laura, for having me. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope you are reminded about some of the things, that will conserve our soil. So thanks again for your time and opportunity. Yeah. Thank you, Carlson. Thank you, Vern. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.